PassportJS to protect and authenticate users to a mean stack application, right? So here we have created a PassportJS directory or project, and so we're going to go to the command line to initialize our Node.js project, right? So we're going to do init. npm init. This is going to create a blank package JSON, right? This is what is going to describe our package, our particular projects. Are going to say what we depend on, right? So, for instance, by default, it takes the name of the parent directory as the name of the project. And it goes through several questions and some defaults, right? Everything is in parentheses is defaults. So version is 1.0. Description. So this is a simple PassportJS mean web app. Okay. Entry point, task commands, Git. This is not connected to a Git. Author, so it's me. License. So there it is. So it's gonna create this this very simple package.json. If we look at it real quick, that's it, right? That's the text file. Notice that it doesn't depend on anything, right? It doesn't depend on an Express. It doesn't depend on anything, right? But as we install the various modules, we're going to make sure that they're recorded inside of this package.json, so that if anyone else wants to reuse, try this out at home. They can clone our repository, type npm install, and npm install will read package.json, and it will bring down all the various libraries so that they can work, try to replicate our project. Make sense? All right. I'm also going to let's see, refresh. Let's see, refresh. I'm also going to add here, let's see, I'm going to add here a Git file here that will allow me to check in things and have it ignore certain portions of my project, right? So for instance, node modules, I don't want that to be included in any Git check-ins, right? So all the libraries, Express and Passport, all those libraries, I don't want to submit that into a repository, but you'll need them, right? So what you guys will do is that you will use npm install. It will read the package JSON and it will download all the libraries you need, okay? Because I am not going to submit any libraries. You'll have to download them yourself, okay? Let's refresh. Okay, there it is. Oh, did I save this? Oh, it's not listing. Is it here? There it is. Git ignore. Okay. What else? All right. So let's get started. Let's create a very simple Express application. Let's go here and let's copy some of the boilerplate code that allows me to create an Express application. We've done this quite a few times. Let's put that in a server file here. Let's say server.js, and in here we'll paste Express. Let's see if that works. We can say node server, and okay, it says that we don't have Express, right? So we'll need to install Express. We'll say npm install Express. Save. The save is important because that's going to record in our package JSON. It'll download Express and it records it in our package. Let's make sure if we go to our package, we'll see that in the dependencies now we have Express, right? So you guys at home, when you download this from our Git repository, you'll be able to replicate this. Very good. Let me try starting the server again. Okay, so it looks like it's running, and we'll try to hit it here with localhost 3000, and it says hello world. So yeah, so we have a minimal hello world Express. Let's also install some of the other stuff that we need here, such as public. Let me copy that, and let me put that in the server. That means that we're now hosting a public directory. Let's create that. So here we have the public, and in here we're going to create a simple hello world index page. So we'll have index, and here we'll say h1 hello world. So instead of having this route sending a hard-coded hello world string, instead what I wanted to do is grab it from the index page, right? So this public directory, right? This public directory maps to this public directory, right? And if I don't ask for any particular file, it'll assume that it's the index page, right? So let me restart the server. And so if I now ask for this again, now it's serving the index page, right? So it's sending me this, right, /index.html. Because I didn't ask specifically for index.html, it says, oh, you must want the index page, right? That's what it's doing. Everybody okay? All right. Oops. Okay, so it works. Let's see, what else? Some other things that we will need from Express is the body parser. So let's grab that. So body parser, there it is. Let me grab that, and Malter as well. I'm going to grab that, and I'll paste it just up here. There it is. If I try to restart the server, it's going to complain, say that I don't have body parser. So let me install that. So npm install body parser, save, and installs that. And also Malter, right? If I try to restart it again, it's going to complain that I don't have Malter. So let me also install the Malter module and save it. And if we go to our package.json, notice that it has added the dependencies of Malter and body parser, right? That's how you will be able to install and try to run this at home. Make sense? All right. So if I try to restart the server now there's no complaints. No complaints, and it still serves up our hello world. Very good. So let's now install Angular. For that, I'm going to need Angular. There it is. Copy. I'm going to put it in my directory under my JS directory. So I'll call it JS, and in there, I'm going to paste my Angular files. Right. Plus, probably we'll need also jQuery. There it is. I'll copy that, and I'll paste it here as well. Plus Bootstrap. I have it somewhere here. Bootstrap. I'll just copy everything here, copy, and I'll just paste it in my public directory, there it is. All right, so I have the Bootstrap and whatnot, everything. Okay, very good. So in my index page, I need to link all that. I'll make it very minimalistic. I'm not going to put the body and the HTML and all that. I'm just going to link to this very quickly. href, I'll go into CSS, and in here I have Bootstrap, rel style sheet, and I'll put here the script. Let's see, we need what? What do we need? We need jQuery. We'll need. What else do we need? We'll link in maybe Bootstrap, and also we'll link here Angular, and also Angular routing. Okay, very good. Plus, what else do we need? We need to create here. Oops, we'll need to create here a body, and we'll say that this is our app. ng app. This is going to be our passport application, and in here I'll just say that this is my view, ng view. I think that's the minimalistic, as minimalist as we can get. Now this is going to complain saying that we don't have a module, right? If we try and hit the index page, you'll notice that the we have here a complaint from Angular saying that you don't have Passport app declared anywhere. It was looking for a declaration of a module called Passport app. So let's create that. We'll go to we'll declare that inside of another app, a JS file, right? Which we'll create inside of our JS folder. We'll create a JavaScript. We'll call it app.js. And in here was where we're going to declare our module, right? So we're going to have var app Angular module, and our module is called Passport app. And right now it's not depending on anything. Let's refresh this. Okay, so no complaints. No complaints. What we want to do here is that in our index page, we want to be able to navigate. We have kind of like a navigation header at the top that will allow us to navigate maybe to the home page, the profile page, and maybe a login page or even a logout page, right? And the home page will be public, so anybody can go to the home page. They don't have to log in. But the profile page will be protected, right? So let's create very quickly here a navigation that will allow us to go to either home, right, and or go to the profile page, or go to login, or logout, right? Logout. Okay, so in our index page, we have these links at the top. That's way too big. Let's add maybe some vertical bars just to, okay, put them like that, right? And this is not going anywhere, right? If I click home, this is really not going anywhere, right? Because there is no route. There is no route that links me anywhere, right? So to do that, we need to do a couple more things, right? We need to, in our app application, we need to load the ng route module, right? That implements the routing mechanism. The routing mechanism, let's go to our cheat sheet and see how we can configure that. This is route provider. Route provider for Angular JS. And I believe they have an example here. Maybe here. I have here. There it is here. In the script. There it is. All right, so let me copy that. Okay. So we're going to have here a configuration of our application. We're going to use our route provider that is provided by the ng route library, and in here's where we can provide some logic on where do we want to go, right? Depending on our single page navigation mechanism, right? Which is all based on hashes, right? Meaning we're never going to leave index page. We're only going to change the hash at the end of the index of that index page, right? And based on the change of that index that hash, we'll navigate one way or another. Okay, so we're going to say that if we want to go home, if it sees home after the hash, we want to go to views home, and we don't have a controller yet, and we don't need a resolve just yet. If we, oops, are we missing something? If instead we want to go to profile, we'll go to the profiles page, right? And if instead we want to go to a login page, we'll go to a login page, right? Right now, nobody's protected, right? And we can go anywhere regardless, okay? Okay. Yes. All right. Yep. No, it's a service. I'm sorry. It's a module. Yeah, that is implemented here in this here in Angular route. Under Angular route declares a module, just like we're declaring a module. So we created a module called Passport, right? So Angular route declares another module called ng route. Okay, so what we're saying here is that hey, my module depends on that module, right? So loaded, right? Load that module. That module also declares lots of different various services, just like we have the $ scope, $ HTTP. Those are declared by default, right? You don't have to do anything to get those, right? Route provider is not available unless you load the Angular routing module. Yeah, we don't have controllers yet, just yet, not yet. Yeah, we'll do it down here later on. No, you would declare them using app.controller, right? Right? And we're gonna do that in a second. Yeah, we're gonna do that in a second. First, let's see that we can navigate our way around this, right? So presumably all our pages live under views, right? So let's do that. Let's create a directory views, right? We're gonna put under the views directory, we're gonna put all our pages. So let's say there's two things we could do. We could declare just the pages under here, okay? And the controller, we can just declare them on our app.js file. That's a shortcut, right, for very small applications, just for prototyping. But as you become more sophisticated, it's a larger application. Typically, what you might want to do is have a directory dedicated to each one of these, right? You have a directory where you have the view, right, the home.html plus the controller, yeah, right? So let's do that, right? That's a little. It sounds like a better architecture. So let's create a directory home, and in there we're going to create the HTML in here, right? So we're going to have here home.html, okay, and in here we're going to have h1 home, okay. So now I have to go back to my control and say that actually my home.html lives under a home directory. Okay, and let's do that for all of these. These presumably will live under a profile directory, and this will live under a login directory. This will allow us to put in there not only the HTML, but also the controller, okay, under each individual page. Okay. All right, so let's see. Will this work now? If I go and ask for home, that didn't work. Do I have to refresh? Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah. So now it works, right? So that's the routing mechanism that saw that it was hash home, and it's injecting the content of the home.html inside of our ng view, right? Right here, it's injecting it in here. Right, so the ng view is dynamically being updated, right, with the content of various pages depending on where I'm navigating. Notice that for all pages, I am going to have the navigation above. Okay. Perhaps this should have live inside of a tag nav. Okay. Right. Right now, login doesn't take me anywhere. Actually, it's complaining, saying that you told me that if I click on login to fetch login.html, there is no login.html. Or if I click on profile, I'll get those kind of errors, right? So let's fix that. Let's go here and say that if it's profile, I want profile.html. If it's login.html. Let's create pages for those. Let me just copy. Maybe I'll copy this. I'll paste. And this will be profile. And inside of profile, I'll rename this. Rename this to be profile.html. And inside of profile, I'll just change the header to be profile. Okay. All right. So let's refresh this. And if I go to, oh, did I use the capital P? I used capital P. Oh, that's an error. This should be lowercase p. So if I click on profile, now I have a profile. I have a home and I have a profile. And finally, let's do login. Let's do login. I'll just copy this, and I'll go and I'll say login. And in login, I'll rename this the login.html. Login. All right. Refresh. If I go to login, I go to login page. Okay. In the login page, we're going to add a couple more things. We're going to add a form for you to fill out so that you can authenticate yourself, right? So some username and password. So let's do an input, and this will I'll tie it to the controller of the login page, but the login page doesn't have a controller, right? It doesn't have a controller, so we'll need to create that, right? So we're going to say that this is user dot username, and this is going to be I'm doing a lot of shortcuts, right? This is not a good use of the break username. So let's use here password, and here I just want a button that says login, and this will notify the controller. This doesn't exist yet. That I want to log in, and I'm passing you the user as an argument. Okay. So if I load the login page, there we go. If I click on login, nothing happens. Right? We don't have a controller for this. So let's create one. In the login page, I'm going to create a controller. I'm going to say new JavaScript. I'm going to call it home.js. And in here, I'm going to create a controller. I'm going to say app.controller. It's going to be called home control, and it's going to be a function that receives the scope service. The scope service will allow us to talk to the client, right, to the front end, and receive that event handler, right, that we want to receive that login. So this is scope login. That's a function that is going to be invoked. Function that receives as argument the user, and we're just going to do console.log user, right? This home JS, we need to load that into the index, right, so that it's loaded as well. And that is going to live where? Where is it? It's under where? It's in views, login slash. Wait, what did I call it? Did I call it home.js? It should be login.js, right? Right. It's a controller for. Sorry about that. So login.js, right? Login.js, which doesn't exist. I'll rename it. All right. It's login.js. Oh, and I named it home too, didn't I? This is login controller. Sorry, login controller. Login controller. There we go. All right. Let's see. Login.js. Yada yada yada. All right. And then so now here I'm going to say when you go to the login page, use the controller named login controller. Okay. Yes. Yes, sure, it should be. Yeah, that's a nice naming convention, right? Again, I'm making some shortcuts here, but yes, typically we want to call the login controller the same thing as a file. Although you might have many controllers in there, right? You might have several pages associated to or several actions for that controller. It depends, right? How you want to break it up, right? Yes, in this case, I would name it. I'm sorry. Right. So you might. Right. Exactly. In the same JS, right? Again, if your controllers start to become bigger and bigger and bigger, definitely you want to split them up into their own files. Okay. So let's see if this works. Let's refresh. So if I log in, okay, we have it undefined, right? So if I click something and I do log in, I do get an object. So I do get an object. So now I want to be able to notify the server that I am trying to log in. right? That I want to send you this information, right? So for that, on the server, we're going to create a service that allows us to receive a login request, right? And we're going to provide a username and password in the form, and you will then verify that this user is who they say they are against some database or some hard-coded data here. Okay, so let's see how it would look like from the controller. From the controller's point of view, I have the user here. I just want to post it. I want to send it over, right, to the server. So I'm going to say HTTP post. We don't have HTTP, so let's load that. Oops, copy. All right. Again, I'm making another shortcut here. Typically, you would put this in a service. You would have a separate service that would host all these URLs, right? But just for time, I'm just going to leave it here. We're going to try and post going to login, right? And I'm going to send you the username, the user information, right? And if it's successful, function, you will reply with a valid user or not. Okay. Well, actually, we don't know if it's going to be a user. We're going to have a response, right? We're going to do a console log response, right? A response saying yes. If presumably if this user exists, I will respond with a user information, right? With all the information about maybe first name, last name, right? Date of birth, all sorts of information about that user. Okay, which you can then display in the profile. Okay, I only provide username and password. You'll reply with an entire user object representing that user. Okay, all right. So right now, if I reload this and I type something, right, it's going to complain saying that there is no post, right? Or that it replied with a 404 saying there is no such post URL on the server. So let's fix that real quick. We'll go into the server, and where's the server? What do I do with the server? Oh, there it is. So on the server, I'm going to have an app that post, right? That's going to be listening for a post in this URL, login, and it's going to receive the user here, right? It's going to say in the request response, right? Presumably the user is going to be in the body, right? It's going to be part of the body when it comes in. So we're going to parse it out, request.body, and we're just going to say console.log user. And for now, we're just going to respond with the same user you sent me. Okay, we're just going to say respond JSON, the same user that you sent me. Okay, so we're going to echo the user that you sent me. All right, let's restart the server. And let's refresh here. And if I try this and I create login, notice that there's an echo. This is me and line 3, and this is line 6 printing out what echoed from the server. Also, at the command line, notice that it did write a console. This is the server saying, yes, I did receive that username. Okay, so notice that it did not do a 404. What we want to be able to do is not have us do the. I mean, what we typically would have to do now is see if this user is in the database, right? And if it is, then reply with the real user object and whatnot, right? But we also want to be able to also perhaps put it in a cookie, right? So or in a session, so that we'll remember that this person has already logged in, right? If it's successful, we don't want to have to do any of that, right? Instead, we're going to bring on board Passport that does this for us. Okay, we're gonna have Passport intercede here, right? To automate a lot of these tasks, right? So to do that, we need to go to Passport. PassportJS is if you want to read all about Passport, you can go to passportjs.org, right? And it shows you several guides on how to use Passport. One of the first things that we need to do is install it, right? We need to install passport here. To do that, we need to do npm install passport save. Okay. This is going to download passport onto locally, and also it's going to update our package. Our package now includes passport. There it is. Also, passport relies on several other packages, right? That are split up into in the passport namespace, right? For instance, passport can provide the ability to log in not only with username and password, but also can provide the ability to log in using Google's authentication or Facebook authentication or Twitter authentication. It allows you to log in with many different ways, right? To log in. Strategies. They're called strategies. Passport strategies, right? The simplest of which is just HTTP authentication. HTTP authentication is you have to authenticate every single time, right? Provide the credentials in the header, right? And I will check your credentials against my database, right, to see if you say who you are. But we want to do something a little more sophisticated. We don't want to authenticate every single URL that we go. We want to authenticate ourselves, and then you remember in the session, right? For that, we're going to use another strategy called the local strategy, right? The passport local strategy. We need to install that as well. We use npm install passport local. So that's going to it downloaded the passport local strategy. There's many other strategies. We're only going to treat here the simplest strategy, just username and password. Okay. All right. Other things that we might want that we'll need is session, right? Express has its own way of working with session, right? By default, it does not include session working with session. Also, it doesn't just like it doesn't know how to parse the body, right? It doesn't know how to parse the cookie, right, from the header. Okay, so we'll need to include that as well. Right, so there's quite a few other packages that we need to include. Let me look at my cheat sheet over here to remember what are all the packages that I need to include. I need to include body parser. We have body parser already, right? We already have that. Malter, we already have Malter. We're not going to use database just yet. We do need parse passport. Definitely we need passport, and definitely we need the local strategy. So we'll copy those two as well. We'll copy those into our own server. So let's copy that here. Passport. Right, just like we're requiring Express, we're requiring body parser, we're requiring passport and the passport local. Passport local is the one that gives the ability of using logging in using username and password. Okay. All right. Other things that we'll need is cookie parser, right, and session, right? So again, Express doesn't know how to handle sessions, so that's in a separate package. We need to do that as well. Let's bring that on board. Okay, so we already installed this. Let's see, we install Express, we install body parser, we install Malter, we install passport and logo. We haven't installed this yet. Okay, let's install that. We go to npm install and cookie parser. Save. What else do we need? We need Express accession. We'll do npm install Express session. Okay, there we go. All right, so we have that. What else do we need? We have configured body parser to be able to parse JSON for URL encoding, to be able to parse multi-part form data. Now, just like we configured these modules, we have to configure these brand new modules. We have to configure passport. We need to configure cookie parser, session. We have to configure all of those. So let's configure those. To configure here, I have how to configure. So we already did this. We already did that. We already did all these, right? We need to configure the session, the cookie parser, and password. So let's bring that to our server. Let's paste that. Okay. Cookie parser, that makes sense. So that's easy, right? It just says, hey, JSON Express, use the cookie parser, right? Just like we did body parser to be able to extract form data from the, JSON data from the body. Cookie parser will parse the cookies and create a map, right? Create a map so that we can retrieve the various cookies by name. Also, we are instantiating a session. We're saying, hey, I want the session to be encrypted, right? So that the session, even if someone is listening to the session, even if session is being stored in the cookie, right? It will be encrypted so that nobody can actually read it and make any sense out of it. For this, we can configure the session to be signed, right? Signed with a particular string, a random string. Or this string can be anything. It will sign the session, right? The session ID, so that it'll be encrypted when it's stored. If it's stored in the cookie or stored wherever it's stored. If anybody intercepts our session ID, right, it'll be meaningless to them, right? Only if you have the secret would you be able to unencrypt the session ID, right, and be able to map it to any data. Okay, so this secret is used to sign that session ID. Yes. Yes, it's a password for the session ID, right? So that if what we're going to do is we're going to ask the browser to keep a cookie with the session ID, right? So that next time they come in, they provide the cookie, we unencrypt the session ID, and it says, oh yes, you've already authenticated with us already, right? Let me grab the user information from the last session, as opposed to asking you to log in again. Okay, right? But we don't want that session ID to be in the clear, or we don't want people to hijacking our session ID, right, and reusing it at a later time. Also, session will time out eventually, right? So every time you provide the session ID, a timer starts counting, right? And when you go beyond 15 minutes or 30 minutes, that session is stale, right? So the session ID will be stale. So even if you log in successfully, if you leave the session open for more than a set time, it'll time out and you will be asked to log in again, right? Because the cookie that you're providing, even if it's a valid cookie, right? It's a stale cookie. Nobody wants to eat a stale cookie. All right, so after the session and the cookie has been initialized, Passport itself needs to be initialized. It says, okay, wake up, right? I'm going to use you. Also, it has its own session management. It relies, Passport session management relies on Express's session management, right? So it's very important that you configure the Passport session after you have configured Express's session, right? So that these two need to occur in that order. First, Express's session gets initialized, and then Passport's session gets initialized. All right, in that particular order. Yes.
So can we say that the module is a whole general framework, and the controllers lives within the module, and it used to modify the view. And can we see that?
You mean in Angular?
Yeah, in Angular, the module is a
yes.
general framework, and the controllers lives within the module.
Yes.
And it is used to modify the view.
Sure. Yeah, it is the controller who provides data for the view.
How about these packages we install in
Yep.
Also
no, so these are very much like when you do import, right, in Java or in .NET, right, or C++, right? You're importing libraries that somebody else has written, right? And the way the mechanism in Node to load other packages or that somebody else has written is to use the require, right? Now require by default, all by itself, will go and start looking in the Node modules, right? You know, these names, Express, map to directories in the Node modules directory, right? And there it is. So Express here maps to this directory, Express, right? Body parser maps to a directory, body parser. Okay, so somebody else wrote these, right? And they're just loading them and making them available here, right?
So then we use JavaScript.
Yeah, these are all JavaScript. These are all written in JavaScript. Yep. You know, in .NET, or you know, they use DLLs. In Java, they use jar files, right? Each particular framework has its own way of splitting up, right, their libraries in a particular way. So there's two things, right? This is server side, has nothing to do with Angular, right? It is the server, it's using Node.js. It is JavaScript, but it's server side, and it has its own module mechanism using require, right? The mechanism in Angular, right, is to use you know, declare a top level module, right? And then if this particular module depends on other modules, you list them here. Okay, so this is the equivalent on the client, is the equivalent on the server of all these requires. Okay, right? And this mechanism of having Node modules and you having in there all these various libraries is the equivalent in the client side, right, of having everything in your JS directory, right, and then using script, right, to load them into the browser. So Angular is on the browser loading its own modules, its own libraries, right, using the script, right, whereas Node.js is using require to load modules onto the Node modules directory. Okay, two separate things, right? They don't have to do anything with one another, right? The only interaction between these two worlds, is through, is through the mappings of these URLs. This is the only time when these two worlds touch and talk to one another, right? Here I have the login controller, right, sending a URL to the server, and the server receiving that URL and responding. This is the only two places where these two worlds collide. Okay? All right? That makes sense? You ready? Okay. All right, I think we're all set with loading all the libraries. Okay, we loaded all the libraries. I think we're all set with configuring and initializing all these libraries. Okay, we're all set with that. Now we're gonna have to start using these libraries. Okay, all right. Actually using libraries to code things, right? All right, so let's see. One of the first things that we need to do is okay, here. So here's login, right? Here's login. Here's the login that we use that we have here. This login. This login. So what we want to happen here, is we don't want to have to check to see if the user is authenticated. We don't want to have to deal with that, or and updating the cookie and updating the session and we don't want to have to do that. That's why we're using Passport. Passport is going to do all that for us. Okay, and Passport does this by creating several callbacks, certain functions that have to be strategically called at different strategic moments, right? That you have to say, when is it that you want to make sure that you're logged in or not? When do you want to go to the database and check for these things? Okay, what kind of response do you want to provide and things like that, right? So what we want to do here is to have Passport intercept our login. We want to Passport say, when I log in, I want you to handle it. Right? I don't want to handle it. I don't want to have to go out and check to see if there's a cookie, if the session, if the person already logged in, right? And I want to have to parse all this username and password, all this stuff. I want you to handle it. Okay. So the way we do this is by introducing before the login page, before the login, right? Before the login, we're going to introduce here what's called a middleware. Passport, basically what it is a it can insert itself inside of the request chain, right? What happens is that, here, this login is the last, what do you call it? Ring is the last ring in a long chain. Okay, this is the, or if you want to see it, this is the leaf in a long tree or branch. Okay, that basically is these magical request and response object. Okay, they have already been pre-processed by the framework, right? Who pre-processed them? Express already pre-processed them, right? For instance, request. Express has already, for instance, parsed the body, right? It made it available in an object here, right? What else does Express do for us? It already parses any of the URL parameters, right? Or any of the path parameters, yes? And it makes it available in the request.params object, doesn't it? Right? So already Express has inserted itself inside of this long chain, right, of pre-processing the request. Yes? Right? Well, we want to insert yet another ring, right, or another branch in this chain. Okay? What we want to do is say, hey, Passport, before getting to me to my login URL, I want you to handle to see if this user is already logged in. Maybe it's already logged in. Maybe they're already in the session. If not, well, then go see if this user exists. And if they exist, well, go fetch that user. If they're not there, maybe respond with a failure. Okay. All right. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna say, hey, Passport, I want you to handle it. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it here, and that's exactly what I want to do. And Passport has a method called Authenticate, right? And you can provide the strategy that you want to use, right? And this strategy can be either local, which is plain username and password, right? Or it can be any of the other strategies that we're not using, Facebook, Google, Twitter, things like that, right? All right. So what this does is, oh, okay, you want me to handle it. Okay, I'll do that. For that, we need to tell Passport exactly how to authenticate. What is the criteria? We need to. I mean, if we don't tell Passport, we need to provide a mechanism by which programmatically we can determine this username and password are valid or not. Right? To do that, we need three functions. One, two of them are so that it can if they're authenticated successfully. Remember, we're going to put the user in the session, yes, and that session is going to be encrypted, right? It's going to be signed. Remember, it's going to be signed. So we need to have a mechanism by which we convert the object representation of the user into an encrypted representation, yes? And we need a mechanism to do the backwards, right? To unencrypt it, right? This mechanism is called serializing and deserializing the session information, right? So to do that, these are the two methods that do that for us, right? We're going to copy that. And we're going to paste it in our server here. Okay, so those are for managing the session backwards and forwards between the session and the user object, right? If there is any. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. The other thing that we need to provide is, what is the criteria by which we will determine whether this user is valid or not, Okay. For that, we need to provide it with a function. This is where Passport is going to parse the username and password from the incoming request, right? From a form that has been submitted. It's going to parse it out and it's going to give it to us. It says, okay, well, here's a username and password. What do I do with them? Are they valid? We need to decide on yes or no. Okay. So Passport, the way we do that is we configure a callback mechanism saying we are using what? The local, we're using the local strategy. We have to configure the local strategy. So we instantiate the local strategy. It's an object that we loaded here, right? That we loaded up here. Where is it? There it is, local strategy. We instantiate it, and the argument to this object is just a function that is going to use to pass us the username and password that it parses from the request, right? Retrieves the username from the request that is coming from the form that has been submitted, and also passes us a function that we need to call to tell it whether it was successful or not. Okay, we call this function saying yes, this username and password are good, or no, this username and password is no good. Okay. So here we're gonna use a very naive way to verify whether the username and password are valid or not. Right. The only thing we're gonna do is that we're just gonna iterate over a local array and compare the username and password combination with objects in this array. Right. So I have a local array. I thought I did. Oh no, I didn't copy that. So I have a local user array. Okay, that I'm just gonna paste here. Obviously, this would be look it up in the database as opposed to an array here. So here I'm iterating over that array, and I'm comparing the username that came in with all the usernames with every single element, right, to see if the combination exists, right? If it exists, right, we return the done, right, object function, right, where the arguments to this function are, the first argument is any errors that might have occurred, right? Maybe we tried to connect to a database, but we weren't able to connect to a database, right? Or maybe we tried to do a network connection and it failed, right? So we weren't able to authenticate this person, so we would generate an error message here, right? Or some kind of error object and send it back, meaning we don't know if they're authenticated or not. We don't know if this person is valid or not. Okay, we're not saying that they're not. It's just that I couldn't tell, right? Because the database is down or whatever. If it's successful, the second argument should be a representation of that user. Okay, it says this is the user. This is the user that I was able to retrieve from the database. This is the representation. If my search for the user fails, okay, we instead return this over here, right? We return, again, no error, right? Because there was no error iterating over our array. And instead of returning the object representation, we return a false, meaning, no, this user is not valid. This user is not valid. Plus, we can pass along an optional message, right? Maybe the password is wrong, or the username is wrong, or the email is wrong, or whatever, right? And that's how we can say, you know, that password doesn't match, or that username doesn't match, or that email doesn't match, right? We can be very specific on what went wrong, right? And give a specific error about that. So there it is, right? So we have that. Notice that over here in the user, we have Alice. We have three users, Alice, Bob, and Charlie, with username. Not only we have first names, we have roles, right? So these are objects. These are objects that are going to go back, right? If we authenticate ourselves. Anyway, so let's restart the server and let's see where we are so far. Yeah, null is an error. Yeah, so yeah, if we have an error, then we would pass it here. But there is no error. Right? We didn't fail communicating with the database, or we didn't fail, looking up in an XML database or whatever, right? If there would be an error, like a network connection, whatever, we would send back an error message here. Okay. So yes, there was no error. I absolutely am sure that this person is not a valid person. Okay. I was successful. I was successful at determining that this user is not a valid user, as opposed to there's an error, I don't know. Okay. Yes. Callback mechanism. So yeah, so callback mechanisms are everywhere in JavaScript, right? JavaScript, because it's a single-threaded mechanism, right? When you want to have asynchronous behavior, you have to provide mechanisms by which you're going to be notified at a later time, right? So all these over here in the servers, when we're connected to a database, right? We see it all the time, right? Where we don't block, we never block. Instead, what we provide is a function that can be called later on by the framework when the framework comes back in a later time, right? So since it's single threaded, we don't want to block and wait for certain callback for certain functions to come back, because it might take too long, right? And instead, we call the function and we come back immediately, and we provide a function that will be called at a later time. This is very common in Java, specifically because functions are treated just like data, right? Are treated just like integers or strings or any other piece of data, right? They can be passed as arguments, and then can be invoked programmatically a later time, right? So it's a very common technique, the callback mechanism. I'm sorry? It means that I am passing you this function, right? Meaning, don't invoke it yet. I am passing it to you. Do not evaluate it yet, right? As opposed to a function that will be invoked. As opposed to that over here, right? Here I am specifically calling that function, right? Over here I am giving you a function that I don't want to be called. I am giving you a function that I don't want it to be called yet, right? This function will be called later, right? It is delegated. It's a delegated call. It will be called later when this login gets invoked. When this login succeeds. Yes, right. What's going to happen here is that this authenticate over here is going to use this function over here. This function will be used when you hit this login. When you hit this login, it says use the local. It means that it will use this function. It will parse the username and password. It will use this function. It will pass the username and password to this function, where it will be determined whether that username and password are valid. And the done, basically what it does is that because this is a middleware, right, that is being executed right before our function, it's going to return a done, right? And it will provide the object as part of the request, right? Or it'll provide it as false, right? And it will make it part of the request when I get to this function over here. So the request, when I get to here, when I get to this function here, the user will have already been authenticated. By the time I get to this function over here, I will already know whether this user exists or not. Okay, so I won't bother even looking at the body, right? I already have a user provided in the request. Actually, at this time, I can say the user is already inserted inside of the request. This user object will either be false, right, if the user does not exist, or it will be the object, the user object, if that user was successfully authenticated. Okay, let's try it out. I think I did it right. Yes, user. Let's try it out. Let's restart the server. Okay, and let's try login again. Refresh. And so if I provide a user that does not exist, right, notice that it comes back with a 401. Meaning, I don't know who you are. Okay. Notice that the server didn't even blink. Right. Passport blocked the callback, the call into the login. It made it to the login, right? But Passport intercepted that, right? And it immediately kicked back saying, nope, right? You cannot access this, right? Instead, if I provide valid Alice, right? Notice that it comes back with a valid user. Notice with all the information that was in that user, right? Including the username and password, which maybe we shouldn't provide, but also the roles, the first name, last name, right? It included that request, this object here. Actually, yeah, no, it's if it's not valid, it responds immediately with a 401. 401 means that it's not that the request failed. It doesn't mean that this is mapped to something that does not exist. It means that the credentials that you gave me are invalid, right? And that you're not authorized to look at this, right? And it comes back with a 401, right? If it's valid, notice that it came back with the object, right? It made it into here. It made it into here, right? The user was added to the request by Passport. Passport added the user into the request. It's a user that we added here, right? It's this user that we added in the array. Okay, the one that matched. Okay, and that's what we're responding back to the client. See that? Right? Notice that if we log in with someone else, maybe if we clear this, yes. We're not using that. It would be in the header. We would have to extract it from the header. So we have Bob here. And notice that Bob is also valid. Okay. Right. So we can in the network notice that it comes back with a post that we posted that let me make it smaller. In the so notice that it responds, the object is included in there. See that? Right. Your username, password, express. It's not including that. I thought it would be here. Okay, notice the cookie that is setting. See that cookie? That's the cookie that it's maintaining, right, to keep track of that object, that user objects, right? So it's being encrypted, and this is how it tells that notice that this cookie is the same. So notice that in the response, there it is, right? It's setting that cookie. So if we use Alice here, Alice, login. So we have this, $3A. Well, it ends with a FG. If we do it again, yeah, presumably it's the same cookie, right? It's the same cookie that it's using, and we can't tell what's in there, right? Although we know that programmatically it represents that particular user that it's currently logged in. Okay. All right. So very good. Okay. So what we want to do now, all right, do we have anything else here? Login. Okay. I think we have everything. The only other thing that perhaps what we want to do here is protect data. Okay. So for instance, if we if we have data that we're exposing, right? So for instance, maybe we have app.get, right? And we have user, and that responds with all the users, right? So this is a request response. This would be a very typical API, right? Maybe you want to expose data like this, right? Through a RESTful or REST. People like to use REST as well. /REST/user. What does that do? That you should retrieve all the users, right? And typically what we've been doing in the last couple of weeks, we would just say, response JSON and respond with the actual data, right? So it would be users. Is that what we called it? Users, yes, right? If we restart the server and we ask for that information, right? And we say, well, actually no. Let me leave that here. Let me open up another one. It says local 3000 REST user. All right, so right now the URL is unprotected, okay? And maybe it's okay, all right? But maybe it's not okay, right? So you want to be able to determine on whether that you should allow people to access this or not, right? So to be able to protect URLs, right? Remember the second half of this, right? Is that what we want to do here is again use Passport, right? Use Passport to intercede here and intercept that URL and verify that if the person has been already authenticated, right? If they're authenticated, let them through. If not, just block and say no, you're unauthorized, right? Push back to 4.1, and then we can then ask the user to log in. All right, so to do that, what we're going to do here is we're going to create a little function here. We create a little function that we want to invoke every time we try to access, right? So here we're saying that insert this, meaning call this function before, right, getting to me, right? And so here's the function. This function will be called, and it receives the same request and response that in the chain, right? It gets the same request and response, and it can one of the things that it can do, it can a Passport adds other functions inside of the request, adds other functions that allows it to very easily you be able to invoke and check to see, has this user, is there a session or is there a user, a validated user against the current request, right? Has the request been authenticated already? Is there a cookie associated to this request? If there is, it can return yes, it has been or not, right? So to do that, Passport adds this function called isAuthenticated, right? That we can very easily check to see, has this request been authenticated already? Are there credentials that are valid for the current request? It returns true or false, right? Obviously, the first time you've never authenticated, you've never logged in, this returns false. There is no cookie associated to this request. And what we could do is we can deliberately respond with a 4.1, okay? Or we can let it through and says, just go, if this has been authenticated, meaning if it's true, if it has been authenticated, just let it through. Go do whatever you were going to do anyway, right? Go to the next ring in the chain, the next branch in the chain, which is this, right? Just continue, call this function, which will respond with the users. Make sense? Right? I'm going to save that. I'm going to restart. And so now if I try to access this user, this array, the data is now protected. It says, no, I can't let you through because there is no session associated to you, right? So let me go back here, use the same browser, and same thing, right? Here I'm going to try and access that, REST, is it REST? User right? Okay, it's unauthorized. So if I go back to my login page and I do authenticate, I go Alice, and I go login. Now there's a session associated to this, right? If I try to do this again, and go to REST user, now I do get the data, right? Because now the browser has a cookie for this request. I'm sorry, has a cookie associated to this open window session, right? And as long as it goes to the same domain, it will provide that cookie, right? And now the server can authenticate that against that. How are we doing with time? All right, I'm almost out of time. All right, there's a couple more things that you know, what to do with that 401, right? Basically, what we want to be able to do with that 401 is we want to in the route. What we want to do right now, I can navigate. You know, profile is not protected. Okay. What we want to do here is the profile. We want to, just like we did in the server, intercept the request. Well, we want to do the same thing here. If you navigate to profile, I want to intercept that event, right? And what do I want to do? I want to go back to the server and check to see if you're logged in. You know, hey, is this, you know, is this user logged in? And the server can say, well, yes or no. And depending on whether you're logged in, I'll let you through to the profile page or not, right? I'll force you to go back to the login page, right? And that navigation logic would live here in the client. We don't have time to go over that today. I'm just going to push my working example in the repository, and you can use that as a starting point for your projects. All right? All right, let's leave it here. I am. Let me just stop this for a second.